This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned to bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health. Let's break down the news. France has a new president, Francois Hollande. Francois Hollande has defeated Nicolas Sarkozy in the French presidential staff runoff, making him the latest EU leader to be swept aside by the crippling debt crisis. Among the first steps the president-elect is planning is to push back against German-led austerity measures. Chancellor Angela Merkel has already invited Hollande to Berlin for talks. Clashes over Hollande's foreign policy are expected both in Europe and overseas, especially from key quarters in America because of his views on phasing out the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Greece remains the focus of Europe's financial and political unease. Political parties that made gains by rejecting oppressive austerity measures still have to assemble a majority coalition in parliament before they can begin governing. The Conservatives got the first try Monday but failed, leaving a new left-wing party to take its turn. If no party can assemble a coalition, the country will need to hold new elections, probably in June. In Russia, Vladimir Putin reclaimed the Russian presidency under the vaulted gold ceiling of a Kremlin palace on Monday, as the police tried to stamp out a second day of protest in the city, passing on orders to detain anyone wearing a white ribbon, the opposition symbol. Mr. Putin took the oath of office for a third time, extending his status as Russia's paramount leader to a total of 18 years. He has said he may run for a fourth, sixth term after that, meaning he could legally remain in power until 2024. Americans that remember the old Soviet Russia remember also that Soviets were an oppressive regime that oppressed free speech and brutally dealt with protesters. America back then was heralded as the opposite of Soviet Russia, placing a high value on the First Amendment and free speech rights of U.S. citizens. My, how things are changing quickly as America becomes more and more like the old Soviet Russia. We now have free speech zones, limiting where and when Americans can protest. And President Obama has signed a new bill that shreds our right to protest even further. The House of Representatives voted 38-33 in favor of H.R. 347 late Monday, a bill which is being dubbed the Federal Restricted Buildings and Ground Improvement Act of 2011. In the bill, Congress officially makes it illegal to trespass on the grounds of the White House, which on the surface seems harmless and necessary. But under current law, White House trespassers are prosecuted under a local ordinance, a Washington, D.C. legislation that can bring misdemeanor charges for anyone trying to get close to the president without authorization. Not to mention, you hop that fence, it's worse than a baseball game. Just see how quick the Secret Service are on you. So why do we need this new bill? Let's find out. Under H.R. 347, a federal law will formally be applied to such instances, but will also allow the government to bring charges to protesters, demonstrators, and activists at political events and other outings across America. Under this new act, H.R. 347, the government is also given the power to bring charges against Americans engaged in political protest anywhere in the country. Anywhere in the country? Covered under the bill is any person protected by the Secret Service. With Secret Service protection awarded to visiting dignitaries, this also means, for instance, that the federal government could consider a demonstration against any foreign president on American soil as a violation of federal law, as long as it could be considered disruptive to whatever function is occurring. Well, let me break this down to you. These bills are important, and paying attention to them is also important, supporting them or rejecting them. What can happen? Well, as our corrupt politicians sell off pieces of America to foreign banks and foreign interest groups, they are selling what belongs to you and me as U.S. citizens. Specifically, the right to elect representatives that represent us and not those of foreign buyers. When they jack up our service fees and usage rates, it's because foreign companies now are running the show. And if you don't like it, you won't be able to protest at the very events where they plot to buy out our municipalities, factories, and cut our jobs. When thousands of protesters are expected to descend on Chicago this spring for the 2012 G8 and NATO summits, they will also be approaching the grounds of a national security event. That means disruptive activity, to whichever court has to consider it, will be a federal offense under this new act. And don't forget, if you intend on fighting such charges, you might not be able to rely on evidence of your own. In the state of Illinois, videotaping the police under current law brings criminal charges against you. We're going to pause now for station identification, and when we come back, I'm going to open up the phone lines. The number to call in is 414-935-2951. I am Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to Breaking Down the News. Apologize for that. RiverWestRadio.com. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. In sports today, Americans countrywide again tuned into their TVs and radios in another pathetic effort to continue their constant preoccupation with the glorification of adolescent games. Hi, I'm Michael Wordsworth, breaking down the news. In spite of the pressing issues that continue to affect our jobs, health, and finances, most sports enthusiasts can tell you the stats of every player in the NFL, but couldn't name one bill that was passed last year by the President and Congress. This is most unfortunate because a democratic republic requires the active participation of informed citizens. Government makes laws that affect our lives and the lives of our families. Maybe we should pay more attention to that than who won the freaking game yesterday. 50 million Americans are now on food stamps. 1 million homeless children on the streets. In this, what is supposed to be the richest country on earth. Did you hear that? There's an estimated to be 1 million homeless children in America today. When I first heard that statistic, I was in disbelief. That's equivalent to the entire population of Milwaukee and its surrounding areas. Personally, I don't care if you watch the game or don't. My point is there has to be a balance in America. As a whole, we are more preoccupied by sports than with the facts of the horrifying economic reality we are facing. How is this jobless recovery treating you? How is the supposed war economy making your life better, or at least not worse? If you have an opinion or some relevant facts to share, give us a call at 414-935-2951. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Welcome again. This is Breaking Down the News. I'm Michael Wordsworth. I apologize for the dramatic lead-in under the guise of a sports news segment. My intent was not to insult the audience, but perhaps arouse a few people to call in today and share their personal financial struggles on this worldwide broadcast, streaming live here on River West Radio. Recently, a guy at the checkout counter at the grocery store was with his daughter, and he put 10 packages of bologna on the register and said to his daughter, "This is it. This is what we're going to be eating for a while." I'm sure everyone out there could share a gut-wrenching story, and there are a lot of stories to tell these days. So get to those phones and call 414-935-2591. Middle-class America is on the ropes. Those below the poverty line are desperate. The situation continues to worsen, and the media keeps telling us we've been in a recovery, a magical, jobless recovery that defies all logic. Remember, first we were going to go from a manufacturing economy to a service industry. Then those jobs were outsourced offshore. Now we see Walmart and McDonald's showing record profits, while companies like Solyndra go belly up. You mean to tell me we can't in America make the best solar panel ever devised on Earth? I believe the number was 5 solar power companies that went under this last year. Solyndra being the big scandal covered in the news. Breaking Down the News is a community-supported information provider covering topics and headlines that didn't make the front pages, but should have. The corporate media conglomerate has proven to be a propaganda tool for the big money guys on Wall Street, but that's no secret. The Fortune 500 companies, foreign interest groups, the list goes on. They continue to put their influence out there while Americans get less and less say. More Americans have been turning away from mainstream media, relying on instead alternative media for their news and information. That's why this show is here, and your participation makes it happen. A lot of people might say, yeah, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. It's always been going to hell in a handbasket. But what can I do? You can get informed. You can snap out of the daze induced by psych meds and colored rectangular screens. Get off sugar, stop eating fast foods, don't drink the poisonous chemicals found in soda water. Call your congressman, call your senator, call your state representatives and local representatives. Find out what's the news behind the news. There's more to it, and there's a lot going on. Some of it's going to scare you if you look into it, but that's okay. Sometimes it's better to face our fears and the responsibilities we have to deal with than to shy away from them, pretending that everything is going to keep going like it is for the next 200 years, and it's just not. There's no way that can happen. Paying attention to your diet and health, we're going to cover topics that will bring you information on what real health is, what we are facing in America, what the doctors don't tell you, what the MDA doesn't tell you. And in the meantime, it begins. There was an article covered recently on sugar and the toxicity of sugar. I believe it was MSNBC that put it out. I was really surprised to see that on mainstream media. There was only one doctor, and he was talking about the fact that after his studies were done, he realized that sugar is actually an addictive substance. We knew that, but it's also toxic. In future shows, we're going to explain how that's toxic, how it's putting on weight on people, how it's throwing off cholesterol levels, and how statins won't prevent that. In the meantime, my personal opinion is you can start by getting off soda water. Got to start somewhere with something. I've been off sugar now for a while. It's been difficult. It isn't the easiest thing. I'm not saying that it is. But I mean, with the soda water, if you knew the truth about it, you really would think twice about drinking 5 or 6 of those things a day. I thought that drinking Blue Sky soda with natural sugar and being an organic soda from the Outpost would be a healthy alternative to my regular soda consumption, and turns out it isn't. Sugar in itself is toxic. I did not know that. When I found that out, I was very surprised and sad, but hey, sugar had to go. You wonder why I'm freaked out about soda water in particular. Well, we're going to do a few articles that'll talk about that, but basically I can say it came out in the news that Coca-Cola contained a chemical known to cause cancer. That was mainstream media news. In fact, the state of California wouldn't allow it. In California, companies have to label products having substances known to cause cancer. So Coke made a special formula for Californians that didn't cause cancer. You see, it is possible. Companies can actually make products that are safe for us, we the United Consumers of America. But we have to be informed. We have to. We have to be united in our consumer interests. We have to vote with our dollars. You start voting with your dollars, you'll start to see the big companies back off. When we collectively fall asleep out there, the wolves close in for the kill. It's a racket, a scam that's been going on since Moses wore shorts. Buyer beware, because big business has learned how to package poisons that couldn't be dumped by law. I mentioned soda water. You don't drink Coca-Cola, maybe? Good, you're avoiding the cancer-causing element in Coca-Cola. However, maybe you like Pepsi. It came out in the news that Pepsi's special flavor ingredient, and I couldn't even make this up, this is absolute truth, Pepsi's special flavor ingredient was derived from the stem cells of aborted babies, human babies. That's the special ingredient to it. I cannot drink a flavor derived from the stem cells of aborted human babies. There's something not right about that. Just the ethical considerations alone are enough to dump Pepsi and Coke altogether, but I digress. Today's topic for callers is the jobless recovery. The illusion, the lie that has been fed to us since the media first announced the beginning of the recovery in 2009. Yep, it was all over back then. And for 3 years, we've been told we've been recovering. It came out in the news that the big companies didn't actually pay back that TARP money, though. The money that was passed through our actual Senate authorizing the TARP bill, which you got to keep in mind, the government has no money. That's why they keep asking us for it. If they had money, they wouldn't have to ask us for it. We wouldn't pay taxes. They just print money and I don't know what. We just get revenues. But the TARP, which is the Troubled Asset Relief Program, was designed to bail out the banks, Fannie and Freddie, AIG. AIG went under. I guess they don't need bailing out, but it was trillions of dollars spent. And the news was putting out for a long time that, that money was paid back, or at least most of it, like the big car companies in the Midwest. I mean, I thought that was something worthwhile, at least try to bail out the big car manufacturers out of Detroit, Michigan. That was the backbone of the middle class pretty much in the Midwest. I mean, that was the biggest section of employment and revenue that the little guys could see. And, well, now those companies, they got their money. I believe GM moved to Brazil. The rest of it was outsourced. The factories were slimmed down. People were laid off, and that business never came back. I'm not sure who can afford a new car today, but I know new car sales are down and manufacturing is down as well. The Democrats, the Republicans, and especially Barack Obama promised that something would be done about the too big to fail banks so that they would never again be a threat to destroy our financial system. We'll see how that goes in just a minute. Again, the number is 414-935-2951. We're going to take a little break for a second, but then we'll be back. You're listening to Breaking Down the News with Michael Wordsworth, riverwestradio.com. It's Wednesday night, May 12th. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News. We do have the phone lines open. Nobody's called in as of yet, but it's a new show, and I don't imagine there's much of an audience out there. But that's my job, to keep bringing you information, things that would perk your interest, relevant subjects. We never talk about anything fluffy here. You'll never hear sports read. You want to hear sports, you can get that on any station, any TV, any radio. It's all over the place. What we talk about here are those headlines that should have been on the front pages. Yesterday, or at least rather Monday, at the 3 p.m. broadcast, I went over extensively the Fukushima number 4 reactor. If you haven't heard, it hasn't made the news. But Senator Ron Wyden went to Japan recently, did his own investigative report. What he found out and what he said in his own words is that the situation with the Fukushima number 4 reactor is actually a threat to national safety here in America. Basically, you still have 14,000 MOX weaponized fuel rods sitting in open chambers, exposed to the air, no longer in the water. One earthquake, one disaster that would cause some disruption could cause these things to explode like they originally did. We still don't know where those original fuel rods went. There was some 3,000, 6,000 missing. I forgot the exact number, but they're in the ocean somewhere. They're in the sky. It's hard to say what happens when plutonium rods blow up. However, the Fukushima crisis remains perhaps the biggest threat we're facing today. There's so many, and I understand that as a viewer, you hear about everything from asteroids coming to Earth to earthquakes to the 2012 Mayan calendar prophecy. You want my prediction? It's not going to end. The Mayan calendar, as far as I understand, it apparently does end, but that's the beginning of its new cycle. I really don't see how these people 4,000 years ago could possibly say, they didn't say themselves that the world was going to end. But in a recent study, I think 1 out of 5 Americans is pretty well certain that the world will end. And tell you what, if we don't wake up and start changing our ways, we're going to wish it had. What's coming is a lot worse than the end. That might sound funny, like what? Imminent death is worse than, well, imminent death is a permanent solution to the problem. The one that we're going to be facing is being alive on a planet with no human rights. Hey, it looks like we have a caller here, so let's take it. Caller, you're on the air. Oh, I'm sorry. That call seemed to have been dropped, or I just can't work this equipment. Here, let me see here. Oh, and there's the problem. Sorry, caller. Your phone line mic was not on. How are you, sir? Oh, all right. If you want to try that number again, is 414-935-2951. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to Breaking Down the News. We're a talk news show. And we're just getting our act together here at River West Radio. We haven't done much advertising yet. That's because we're still putting together the programming. Fine shows such as this, Cafe Olay, the Mike Spider Show. There's a whole bunch of them coming along here. Well, caller, I am apologizing that we didn't quite get your call, but if you call back in, we'll try this again. All right. Meanwhile, I was talking about that the TARP money wasn't actually paid back. I'm going to find that actual article and read that one Friday because most people don't understand. It's not in the front pages, so, I mean, that's where most people look. You glance over the front pages, and this is the part where it's not so much the mainstream media is lying all the time as it's a lie of omission. It's what they don't say that ends up being the opposite of the truth, and we're becoming too dependent, too trusting of our friend the television to tell us what's real and what's not real. And so this is why I urge people to check out alternative news sites like naturalnews.com, infowars.com, American Free Thinker, the Economic Collapse blog. There's so many. Dr. Mercola, he's got some really great health information news all the time. These people are working very hard to bring the news to you, but what we need is listeners. And whereas some of the older generations, they're not so internet savvy, they don't get this news. So if you know somebody that isn't into the internet, have them show them how to work the thing. Show them where this news is at, and show them the parallel that the mainstream news doesn't actually cover. So the TARP money that wasn't paid back, we've been given the illusion that the economy's been going fine. However, the Democrats, the Republicans, and especially Barack Obama, they promised that something would be done about the too-big-to-fail banks so that they would never again be a threat to destroy our financial system. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2008, most people do remember that we were facing a possible meltdown worldwide, global financial system meltdown, and that was narrowly averted by the TARP money, the money that was actually legislated to bail out the too big to fail banks. But I mean, if they're too big to fail, why do they need us? Why do the American taxpayers had to come to their rescue? And American taxpayers today are used to big numbers. When you hear, I remember when I was younger, you'd hear hundreds of millions of dollars in aid, and then a decade later it'd be hundreds of billions of dollars in aid. And now we're up to trillions in debt. That $15 trillion debt that is recorded, made public, that's not all America owes. I mean, when you got the Democrats and the Republican arguing over the budget, it was some measly 150, 250 million, even 150 billion. I mean, you know what 150 billion is to America's in terms of what we spend on a daily basis? It's nothing. Does it add up? It does add up. Were we a rich and great nation? We were. Is that changing? It's changed. In fact, everything's being just pretty much propped up at this point. You take out the pillars of that create, in other words, the stock market's way up, isn't it? Well, it also takes more dollars to buy those same stocks, so of course they're way up. But they can only last so long. They have plunge protection teams right now making sure that one company stays up while another one goes down. The whole thing doesn't fall apart. That's the justification for these plunge protection teams. They're actually an independent private company that runs that. And the whole thing, in my opinion and the opinion of others, it's one big illusion. I mean, all the pensions are riding on that, they tell us. If that stock market got below 6,000, that would be the end of the pensions. And you could say, well, what are we supposed to do then? We have to keep the stock market up. Well, what we should have done, in my humble opinion, is we should have back in 2008 allowed the market to correct itself. We should have never bailed out these too big to fail banks. And we did. And the argument remains now. We're still debating, was that the decision? Without a doubt, had that bailout not occurred, there would have been some calamity. But my point is that kicking the can down the road doesn't make the can go away. It's going to come back to bite us, and when it does, we're going to be experiencing the same austerity measures that Greece is facing, Spain's facing, Iceland faced, Ireland faced. Oh, geez, Ireland was doing great until they got into the EU and didn't even get to vote on that, the people. And they were told that their economy was great. As soon as they got into the EU, wham, oh no, your economy's bad, we got to bail you out, you owe us a bunch of money, austerity measures. That's how it goes sometimes. And when politicians are leaders, we don't have leaders. But the problem isn't the leaders. It's us, the followers. We the suckers that refuse to hold our leaders accountable or lack the edge. Oh, hey, another call. All right, let's try this again. Good afternoon, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, thank you for calling. I take it you've heard some of what's been said today, sir.
Yeah, well, I do have to say one thing. When you have a private bank printing your money, pretty much legal counterfeiters, they control the up and down. They can do whatever they want. They print out trillions of dollars, and it causes inflation. I mean, if you look at the EU, it's a central bank controlling all of Europe, and they're just printing money. And they loan it to these governments at interest, just like the Federal Reserve does to us.
Well, sir, I must commend you. You are definitely an informed caller, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is exactly the kind of feedback we were hoping for here. Where do you obtain your information, sir, if I could ask? What do you read?
The internet. I don't watch mainstream television. MSNBC and all the other mainstream networks are both working for either the Democrats or the Republicans, and they're both the two sides of the same coin. I mean, with the Republicans, you get an iron fist, and with Democrats, you get an iron fist and a velvet glove.
Exactly. So basically, you're saying, I like to call that the split paradigm. You got Coke or Pepsi there. You take your pick, but they're both colas that'll kill you. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I mean, you can either have a nice guy robbing you with a knife, or you can have a guy who's just going to be an asshole. Or excuse my language.
No, it's quite all right. We're all getting our chops down here, but feel free. I understand that this is a serious topic, and sometimes those expletives are necessary. So let me ask you, in your opinion, I don't know if you're able to answer this, but if you could have gone back in 2008 and made the decision to bail out the banks or not, what would your call have been?
Well, if you have an understanding of the free market system, when a business, even a bank, is going under, you have to let the market clear. You have to let the bank go bankrupt or the business go bankrupt. Let the market clear, and that gives opportunities for other businesses to grow up around it, and they'll replace it. There's no reason to do any of this. The only reason the government's doing that is because their buddies on Wall Street or their buddies in these high CEO positions are putting pressure on them and saying, well, I'm not going to give you the money to run your campaign. I'm not going to do this for you. I'm not going to give you the favors unless you do what I want. And you've got the big oil group. You got Halliburton, that's got our government by the throat. You've got the
DynCorp
industrial complex that's got our government by the throat.
Right, and companies like DynCorp as well, and everybody's positioning themselves in Dubai. I just read in the newspaper that Qatar, in the Mideast, they're opening up a new global transaction bank where apparently the ECB and other institutions will be able to funnel their money into. It's just a big shell game. I'm sure you'd agree. But you hit it right on the nail, sir. What is your name?
My name's Tom.
Tom, yeah, their first names are fine here. I understand. In fact, callers, feel free to, you can say your name is anything, and it doesn't matter. I could understand why sometimes it's better to have a little anonymity to speak your mind. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell? Right now, we're doing a worldwide broadcast. This is archived. We don't have too many listeners at the moment, but we're hoping that builds up. What other points would you like to make, Tom?
Well, my point would be to, if you're looking for change, I mean, I hate to toot a political horn, but I'm a libertarian, and
right.
I believe that if there's any candidate out there to vote for, it's Ron Paul.
Oh, that's absolutely right. You won today's prize. I was going to keep my political affiliations off, out of here, but I have to be honest and agree with you. The only chance in hell we have is Ron Paul. Hey, did you hear that he's actually doing better than they say he is? Did you read about how he captured the delegates?
He won at least 8 states over Mitt Romney.
Ain't that something? Now,
well,
wait. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, caller.
It's something that people actually want freedom. Back in 2008, people called him, a radical. He's too crazy. Freedom is just actually having freedom. Wow, that's a new idea. And now people are finally realizing that the guy he hasn't flip-flopped. He's not changing his ideas. He's
never flip-flopped. You can look at his record for 25 years as a congressman, and whether you agree with him or not, he's at least consistent. You're absolutely right.
And he predicted the financial crisis and the worldwide crisis that we're in the 80s. In the late 80s, he predicted what was going to happen. And he's been doing it, and everything that he said came true. The Federal Reserve needs to be audited. Alan Greenspan said himself, they are a private bank. That's like me calling myself Federal Tom and saying I'm part of the government. They're not. They're a private bank printing money at interest to the government. It's counterfeiting. It's legal counterfeiting, and then we're footing the bill to pay that money back. If we got rid of the Federal Reserve, we cut $1 trillion in debt right off the top.
Right off the top. I mean, let me ask you: when you own a company and you're running business, and say your business fails, what happens to you? Do you get bailed out? No. No. If these big businesses get bailed out, can I go to the government and say I can't pay my cable bill? I'm going to lose my house. Can I get some money? Can you bail me out? I mean, they don't want to bail the little guy out. And I mean, yeah, there's programs, but they're not going to straight out write me a blank check and just say here you go. Well, sometimes they do, but I guarantee you that there's some socialist agenda run by big mega corporations to gain totalitarian monopolies over our markets. If they do, there's nothing free. There's no free lunch. But ironically, it's in this capitalist system that they're asking for the handout. In other words, it seems like the Republicans are for corporate socialism and welfare, and the Democrats are for the people's socialism and welfare. Either way, when we vote to drain the public coffers, assume the whole country's broke. It's not going to happen.
The thing is, the government is not run by our votes. It's run by a group of men that are rich and hold all the money, and what they say goes. And what they can engineer economic collapse to make events go the way they want it. I mean, I hate to be kind of a crazy radical, but
Not at all.
there's no choice. They want it, and that's why our education system sucks. They want you just smart enough to do the paperwork, just dumb enough to swallow the crap that they give you every day to swallow. I mean, they want us to be cattle. They want us to follow directions, and they want us to work for them. That's all they want.
What do you think some of the steps we could take as individuals to turn this around? I mean, other than get informed, have you come up with any ideas? Obviously, you probably talk to people, and I'm sure you get a lot of backlash from people that disagree with you. But
the thing that I say to do is vote. I mean, yes, we might not have that great of a choice, but I mean, the powers that be obviously have to have at least some popular opinion going for them. So, I mean, if they see that Ron Paul or a candidate that's actually going to make change is really, really, really getting a lot of the people behind him, they're going to be forced to put him in there, and there's change is going to be forced. I mean, show your opinion. I mean, become informed. I mean, just become informed. Don't just go to the newspaper or the TV, because the TV is going to lie to you.
it's going to lie.
They manipulate it. You can manipulate statistics. You can manipulate this. You can manipulate that. But usually, I find on online, you can find the truth if you really look for it.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's out there, but often I noticed that there's a few strange phenomena that goes in with denial, for instance. People hit the wall. I try telling them about these things, and for a second they're half listening, but when I start really getting through to them, it's amazing to just watch their minds shut down and go to sleep right in front of me.
It's because they've been told something their whole life, and it's like telling a kid Santa Claus isn't real. They're shutting down. What? That can't be. The government. We're the greatest country in the world. America's always right. We're for freedom. And once you tell them that we're not, and we're being run by corporate scumbags, they freak out. They don't want to. They don't want to hear the truth. They've been programmed to believe whatever the TV tells them and just swallow the crap. Like I said, they don't want. They don't. Our education system's failing because they want it to fail.
Exactly.
They don't want people smart. Intelligence is a threat to their authority.
It sounds to me like you're suggesting that there's a scientific dictatorship, a technocracy looming behind the scenes, running a sort of an invisible hand, writing the agenda.
More of an invisible autocracy. Yeah.
Are you familiar with UN Agenda 21? It's just off the top of my head. We're going to be discussing that topic coming up on shows, but I'm just curious.
I think I know what you're talking about. I'd have to look it up, but I think I know what you're talking about. Is it the one where they're talking about the major players in the UN being able to pretty much run roughshod over the other countries?
Right.
There's a whole
agenda
list of stuff that they can do.
Right. The reason I like to mention UN Agenda 21 is because sometimes people might say, well, this is conspiracy talk. And I'm like, it's not a conspiracy.
Exactly.
It's an agenda. It's called Agenda 21. Google it. You'll find out that this thing has tentacles everywhere. And the main thing that's so insidious is they're actually getting into city common councils and putting in these NGOs, non-government officials. And these guys actually sway the decision-making process through a technique called the Delphi technique. Have you heard of the Delphi technique?
No, I haven't.
Well, it sounds to me like you have, in the sense that you know that they're manipulating the opinions towards a direction. They don't have complete control, but they're basically steering society within that.
Exactly, and they want it to go the way they want. They're going to push their agenda, and if you look at it, they what they want is a one world currency, and that currency is going to be controlled by a private bank, and that private
cashless.
And once that bank controls the world's money, they control the world's government, because whoever controls the money controls the people.
Now, are you listening to this caller, people? Because this man is speaking the absolute truth. He's talking about the golden rule. He who has the gold rules. And in this case, this has been a story. Tom, how long? I'd say this has been going on in its current form for about 300 years, back to the 1700s. But, I mean, what
Oh yeah, I think America has been really the really bad part of it started. We fought it for a long time. I mean, it was in Europe, the banking systems and stuff.
Right.
But America was good at fighting it up until 1913 when we put in the Federal Reserve Act. When a bunch of rich guys got together
On Jekyll Island, right? Jekyll Island, was it?
They engineered it, and they pooled all their money together, and they put in their papers that certain big banks were going to crash, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy because they pulled their money out, which was a majority of it, and that was the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. They all got together and said, hey, let's cause this, and we'll force Woodrow Wilson's hand into doing this. And
yes.
even at the end of his term as president, Woodrow Wilson regretted it.
He did. I actually remember him saying that he felt he was duped in this whole process.
Yeah.
And when did that pyramid with the eye started? Was that 1938 before that appeared on the dollar bill?
That was under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Put the seal on the back with the all-seeing eye.
Right. Isn't that amazing? We all grew up looking at that thing, wondering, in God we trust. But I always had to ask, in what God are you talking about? The money God?
Exactly.
Is this a picture of him? Is this what the God looks like? I mean, is this little guy with the eyeball up there watching us all, controlling everything? Sounds to me like a control freak.
Yeah, I got to get off the phone, but I enjoy our talk, and
Tom,
I'll definitely give a call back and watch your show more and tell my friends about it.
Hey, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we try to get in at 3, but Zav gets in a little late, and it's about 3:15. But, Tom, I appreciate you calling. I'm glad to hear that you're out there. Keep talking. Keep the faith, baby. We love you. Take care.
All right, take it easy, man. Bye.
All right. Well, you got to say that was, in fact, an awesome first call. I loved it. Loved it. Tom, really, really good information. We're going to take a short station ID break, and we'll be right back to hammer out some more truth and facts in this that you can only call an information war. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. All right, you're listening to Breaking Down the News. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We just had our first historic call-in. His name was Tom, and we really want to thank him. Hopefully we'll be hearing back. That number to call is 414-935-2951. I don't know if you heard our last conversation, but it went really well, and that's exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for. It would also be good to hear from people that disagree. I'll tell you right now on this show, I like to pick on Democrats and Republicans. I'd like to say something harsher, but I think they both have shortcomings and inadequacies that they cannot see from the inside their own parties. The Democrats, on the one hand, have traditionally been run by socialists, which you could understand. A lot of people here in Milwaukee, we come from Germany. Socialism seems to work in those smaller countries, or so it seemed. Socialism was being paid for by that $5, $6 gallon gas, but, they don't have 3,000 miles to deliver their eggs like we do in our country. And the American economy was built on $2 a gallon gas. What are we up to now? 4, it's dropping back. Well, it's going to go up higher. I'm sure you're going to see in the near future 5, 6, according to Goldman Sachs, you could see $8 or $9, $10 a gallon if the Iranian crisis blows out and you got the Straits of Hormuz shut down. Of course, I'm sure the caller Tom would agree that that's all part of the plan. How to slowly take down America, take our pay, take our jobs. President Obama says he doesn't even need approval from Congress now to go invade foreign countries. Says that NATO is the sufficient, and well, that's something that just we as Americans, we have to speak up. We have to become aware that this is we're all in the same situation together here in this country. I don't care what color. Hey, we got another call here. Let's take it in. Yes, sir. Caller, you're on the air. How are you, sir? Or ma'am?
I'm pretty good.
Hey, go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I was just calling to comment about the media and how it's such a distraction compared to all the real news and things that we need to be paying attention to.
Sir, it sounds like you have your radio on in the background. Could you shut that off? We're getting some feedback here. Don't mean to diminish your point, but
Oh yeah, apologies. I'm sorry.
not at all. You're saying that we're being distracted by what? What are some of the bigger distractions today?
Just in general, the football, basketball, soccer industry, all of that, and the multimedia, the music industries, and all this and the other. It's kind of like okay, music is good and having culture is pretty good, but food and war is more of a bigger problem rather than just every Sunday sitting down and eating chips and playing watching football.
I couldn't agree more. Did you hear earlier when I mentioned that we have 1 million homeless children in America now?
Yeah, I mean, like, what the hell? How can people not pay attention to these type of things? They just want to make sure that they can watch football and the Super Bowl every Sunday, but the more important matters are never covered by news or any type of TV or internet aid other than conspiracy theorists.
Well, have you noticed that it's actually, for some time now, it's just become unpopular to even discuss politics? I mean, if you're a Democrat, you don't want to hang around Republicans. If you're a Republican, you don't want to hang around those liberal, egg-headed socialist Democrats. It goes both ways. The complaints are on both sides, but nobody's talking about actual issues. They're talking about their party politics.
Yeah, it's just a runaround of ego. That's basically what it is. People who don't want to let go of their old ideas. They were a Democrat. Their parents were Democrats. So now they are Democrats or Republicans or liberals. But they're really not covering the bigger picture. I mean, we're having a global takeover, and they're concerned about small things as though healthcare and this and the other. I mean, it's just...
I'd say
mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling, and I'd say part of that problem is a lot of people don't realize what is being taken over and how we are losing civil rights, losing jobs, losing influence in the Senate and Congress. I agree with you absolutely. Caller, is there any other point that you'd like to make?
No, not other than the points that I've already made. The media is just basically helping a global takeover.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I thank you very much. Take care and call back to the call back anytime. It's good to hear from you. Indeed. Oh, it's encouraging to hear the voice of the people. That's what this is all about. We the people. We were mentioning earlier about the Democrats and Republicans and Barack Obama. They promised to do something about these too big to fail banks. Well, those promises have not been kept, and the too big to fail banks are now much bigger and much more powerful than ever. The assets of the 5 biggest U.S. banks were equivalent to about 43% of U.S. GDP before the financial crisis. Today, the assets of the 5 biggest U.S. banks are equivalent to about 56% of U.S. GDP. 56%. So if those banks were too big to fail before, then what are they now? They continue to gobble up smaller banks at a brisk pace, and they continue to pile up debt and risky investments as if a day of reckoning will never come. But of course, a day of reckoning is coming, and when it arrives, they will be expecting more bailouts just like they got last time, won't they? I'd like to quote this article from Bloomberg. We always find this information that the caller Tom was talking about, and this last caller talking in, people are getting informed from alternative media, found mostly on the internet. But you find that most of this information is in your mainstream media. I mean, you can access through Google all the mainstream media outlet conglomerates, the corporate prostitutes, as we like to call them, Prostitutes being a play on the oldest profession known to man, which may or may not be true. But let's not linger there. Let's get to this Bloomberg article. 5 banks: J.P. Morgan Chase and Company, Bank of America Corp., Citigroup Inc., Wells Fargo and Company, and Goldman Sachs Group Inc. held $8.5 trillion in assets at the end of 2011. $8.5 trillion. That's like over half of what the debt we owe right now. Equal to 56% of the U.S. economy. 56%. I guess the U.S. economy is 13 trillion. So, well, close enough. And this was according to central bankers at the Federal Reserve. They held $8.5 trillion in assets at the end of 2011. 5 years earlier, before the financial crisis, according to this Bloomberg article, the largest bank's assets amounted to 43% of U.S. output. The big 5 today are about twice as large as they were a decade ago relative to the economy today. Despite all of the talk from the politicians, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So why isn't anything ever being done? Well, one reason is because these gigantic financial entities funnel huge quantities of cash into political campaigns, as our caller Tom was mentioning. For example, Barack Obama. A lot of Democrats out there love him, support him, and that's your right. As an American, you have the right to vote for and support who you want. I would die for your right to choose. However, or at least I wouldn't die so quickly, but I'd take up arms to fight somebody. You know what I mean. Patton said, never be in a hurry to die. The object of this is to make the poor sons of B and the other country die for his cause. Die for his country. So, do you, Barack Obama gives nice speeches about the dangers of too big to fail banks, but he's also more than happy to take their campaign contributions. Goldman Sachs, yep. Barack Obama's heavily funded by the Wall Street guys, the very ones that, typically on the Democrat side, they say, well, we're liberals, we're Democrats, we're not for big corporations, but we're for our Democratic leaders. Well, I don't know. You can't be for both. I mean, when clearly Barack Obama was funded by Wall Street interests heavily, and he'd play that game of, oh no, we're going to do something about this. Sorry, I don't have my Barack Obama accent down yet, but it was fun making fun of Bush, actually, to tell you the truth. That was a little easier, but Obama's like almost too serious to even make fun of. I mean, it almost like minimalizes the seriousness of the issue. So do you really expect that Barack Obama is going to bite the hands that feed him? Of course, he's not going to do that. The truth is that the Obama administration and the Federal Reserve have done everything they can to make life very comfortable for the big Wall Street banks. During the last financial crisis, the too big to fail banks were absolutely showered with bailouts. Meanwhile, hundreds of small and mid-sized banks were allowed to die. When representatives from those small and those mid-sized banks contacted the federal government for help, often they were told to try to find a larger bank that would be willing to buy them. Sadly, the last financial crisis simply accelerated the consolidation of the banking industry in the United States. That happened in the Great Depression, too, the first one. And that's been going on for several decades. Today, there are less than half as many banks in the United States as they were back in 1984. Half of the banks gone, and every now and then I check in the articles. It's kind of like that article where birds mysteriously dropped out of the sky for unknown reasons, but their guts were all melted out. And nobody knows why. They said firecrackers did it, or who knows, right? Well, I mean, it's the same way with these. These banks are going extinct. You see them every now and then, but we're not really counting up the tally of like how many are really hitting the skids. Most of these banks were either purchased by bigger banks or they were allowed to go out of existence. And this banking consolidation trend has allowed the big Wall Street banks to absolutely explode in size. Back in 1970, the 5 biggest U.S. banks held 17% of all U.S. banking industry assets. Back in 1970, the 5 U.S. banks held 17% of all U.S. banking industry assets. Today, the 5 biggest U.S. banks hold 52% of all U.S. banking industry assets. 52%. So where will this end? That's a good question. Callers, feel free to call in if you have any input on this. 414-935-2951. If you go to the Ustream video, you'll see our little breaking down the news sign. That number's posted there. And the funny thing is that the Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke and other Fed officials keep giving speeches where they warn of the dangers of having banks that are too big to fail. But they're always asking for more consolidation of power to make an even bigger bank that's too big to fail. And then it's going to fail, and then we got to bail it out, and then it's even a bigger bank. I don't know where the logic goes with this, because I can see it's going to fall before anything. Sounds to me like the most secure approach would be to have a whole bunch of little banks and a whole bunch of thousands of micro economies throughout the world, versus what the caller Tom was trying to say about how they want to go to a one world global currency. Yeah, if you don't believe them, check online. You're going to find out that that's true. I mean, I remember Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan back in 2008 calling to depeg the dollar from oil. Which, let me break that down for you, for callers that don't know, that the main reason why the U.S. Treasury note has been accepted globally, it's held a hegemonic status since basically World War II. The reason is what makes money work? I always tell my children this. What makes money work? Well, the fact that it's redeemable. I mean, when the pioneers first came here, the Indians traded little seashells. I forgot the exact name of these shells, but they were a black and white shell, and they used them as currency. And you might ask, well, how'd that work? Well, the early pioneer settlers that came in, they used that during a certain season, but then what they really wanted at the end of the season was these pelts that the Indians had, these furs that they would use to make clothing, blankets, and whatnot, skins. And the Indians would take the shells as a means of barter. They would accept that, and immediately that made those shells redeemable for something they wanted. And my point in mentioning is this: that's what makes money go around. That's what makes the cat chase its tail in the world. Is since World War II, basically, since the OPEC consolidations, you've had it where if you wanted to buy something, I apologize. If you wanted to buy oil, you would have to trade it in for U.S. currency, because we had a cartel on that. We had a monopoly on that, and that was holding America good and strong for a long time. It really was, and all the other currencies ended up being pegged to the dollar. But you had Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke saying, hey, we need to depeg from the dollar. Recently, you also have the new French president, Francois Hollande. He says he'd like to get rid of the U.S. currency. And, that might eventually happen. It might go the way of the dodo, but do you have a better idea at the moment? I'm not sure. This is something that we should have planned out, and we haven't been. So what are you going to do? So Fed officials keep giving speeches where they warn of the dangers of having banks that are too big to fail. For example, during a recent presentation to students at the George Washington University, Bernanke made the following statement about the U.S. banking system. He said, but clearly it is something fundamentally wrong with the system in which some companies are too big to fail. Well, really, Ben? I mean, Helicopter Ben, remember that's what we called him, because he was going to dump dollars out of a helicopter if he had to. And he has. I think he's running out of helicopters, though, because the Feds, they got those interest rates so low. There's nowhere to move here. So does that mean that Bernanke is against the too big to fail banks? No, of course not. The truth is he showered those banks with trillions of dollars in bailout money during the last financial crisis. The amount of money in secret loans that some of the big Wall Street banks received from the Federal Reserve was absolutely staggering. The following figures come directly from a GAO report. Citigroup received $2.513 trillion. Morgan Stanley, $2.041 trillion. Bank of America received 1.344 trillion. Goldman Sachs, 814 billion. That's kind of surprising because they're probably the ones that Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan have hold out the strongest, and they got the least. So, and J.P. Morgan, yep, 391 billion. So, they didn't need too much of a loan. I mean, look, if you're J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, we're too big to fail. We have $100 billion in assets, but we're a little broke. Can you loan us 814 billion? You know, Chase Manhattan, could you loan me 391 billion, man? If that was your friend, you tell him, hell no, you're out of your freaking mind. Bernanke has shown that he's willing to move heaven and earth to protect those banks, though. So what did these banks do with all that money? They certainly didn't lend it to us. Lending to individuals and small businesses by those big banks actually went down immediately after those bailouts. There was a big credit freeze. Nobody wanted to give up the money. It's interesting. Instead, one thing that those banks did was they started putting massive amounts of money into commodities, which is always a good thing because commodities are something, unlike a fiat currency, which is just as good as the paper. One of those commodities was food. Over the past few years, big Wall Street banks have made huge amounts of money speculating on the price of food. And that's caused the food prices all over the globe to soar. And it's caused tremendous hardship for hundreds of millions of families around the planet. And continuing on the topic, the following is from another article in the Independent. Here I read, speculation by large investment banks is driving up food prices for the world's poorest people, tipping millions into hunger and poverty. Investment in food commodities by banks and hedge funds has risen from 65 billion to 126 billion in the past 5 years, helping to push prices to 30-year highs and causing sharp price fluctuations that have little to do with the actual supply of food, says the United Nations lending expert on food. How did you get that job? He's the United Nations leading expert on food. That's what we need. So we're going to talk about the Codex Alimentarius and the other wonderful UN agendas like Agenda 21 and really what their attitude towards food is. But anyhow, hedge funds, pension funds, and investment banks such as Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Barclays Capital now dominate the food commodities market, dwarfing the amount traded by actual food producers and buyers. All right, that was from the Independent. Goldman Sachs alone has earned hundreds of millions of dollars in profits from food speculation. Can you imagine what kind of mindset it takes to do this? Can you imagine taking food out of the mouths of hungry families on the other side of the world so that you and your fellow employees can pad your bonus checks? It's really disgusting. But that's the way the game is played. It's set up so that the big guys will win and the little guy will lose. The other day I wrote about how this particularly was true when it comes down to our system of taxation. Well, since that article, I've discovered some new numbers that were just released by Citizens for Tax Justice. Some of the things that have been uncovered are absolutely amazing. Let me see if I got this paper here. Yep, here it is. Between 2008 and 2011, Verizon made a total profit of $19.8 billion and yet paid an effective tax rate of 3.8%. Between 2008 and 2011, General Electric made a total profit of $19.6 billion and yet paid an effective tax rate of 18.9%. Between 2008 and 2011, Boeing made a special profit, $14.8 billion, and yet paid an effective tax rate of 5.5%. And I say an effective tax rate because in the end, it's very difficult to say how much these guys actually pay. It's like nailing down the GDP exactly or something. Go Google the GDP and read that explanation. It's, boy. Anyhow, you got Pacific Gas and Electric made a profit of $6 billion. They paid a tax rate of 8.4%. So why should middle-class families continue to be suffocated by outrageous tax rates when hugely profitable corporations such as General Electric are able to get away with paying nothing? Our current tax system is an utter abomination and should be completely thrown out. We need major, massive overhauls. But as is the case with so many of these other things, our current system is going to persist because the big guys really enjoy the status quo, and they are the ones that fund political campaigns. It would be bad enough if the big guys were beating us on a level playing field, but that's just not the case. America's going to have some terrible live and learn lessons coming up here. And, well, we're a new country. I mean, when you think about it, we've only been around for 200 years. What is that? In the grand scheme of things, 200 years amounts to not much. Not much. I mean, all those European countries, their histories go back, 900 or more years, typically. Some of the newer countries were formed out of previous empires and republics, but they still have a long, long history, a lot of change-ups there. And here in America, we were supposed to be the new extension of things. The Magna Carta, starting in the 1200s, basically developed common law. I want to go over common law, exactly what that is, because a lot of it's just common sense, and we're getting divorced of that. And that developed into this Declaration of the United States, but more importantly, the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights. You got to keep in mind that the executive power, the power represented by the president, traditionally, that role was held by a monarch or king or emperor. And now we've got it as one of three balanced segments of government where we divide it up. No one person makes the laws and prints the money and judges and makes executive decisions like going to war. But that being the case, we have had a situation where the president, it was built in where he wouldn't obtain too much power. And over the last 20 to 30 years, the executive powers have been increasing. Let's not forget Bill Clinton on the way out. He had Robin Rubens sign off, and he got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. That didn't directly affect the executive privileges, but it did set the stage for what was going to come. After that, Bush 1 and 2, both those guys, they set the stage for further executive powers, and now Obama's inherited them, and he's bringing the bases home. I mean, the bases were loaded by Clinton and Bush, and now Obama is supposed to hit that home run. And is he hitting it? I don't think so, because he's having a tough time selling some of this stuff to the people. All right, well, callers, we're breaking down the news. I'm Michael Wordsworth. The number to call in is 414-935-2951. If you have something to say, great, please add it. Otherwise, we're going to be picking this up again Friday at 3 p.m. Usually it comes around about 3:15. So if you want to hear us live on the air, we're at 3:15. Other than that, it's 3 o'clock. We're going to try and do the 3 o'clock. Well, before I close here, I'd like to play this little interview that we did with the FBI. And of course, it's a comedy sketch, but a little levity is good for us. So I'm going to play this, and then I think we're going to get out of here. If you'd like to call in, though, feel free, please. 414-935-2951. The FBI headquarters is a huge modern building in the middle of downtown. Cars and trucks drive past the front entrance on this very active street, and these doors will lead us to the elevators that will take us to the office of Deputy Director Hank Polarank.
Welcome to the FBI headquarters. Can I help you?
Yes, I have an appointment with Deputy Director Polarank.
And your name is?
Michael Wordsworth from RiverWestRadios.com, breaking down the news show.
Michael who? No.
The staff at the FBI was professional and courteous as they greeted me, and after a few security complications were smoothed out, I was soon able to get in to do my interview. Michael Wordsworth from Breaking Down the News.
Hey, come on in, take a seat.
And it was an interesting interview. How many terrorist plots has the FBI foiled in the last few years?
We've been busy, very busy with ongoing investigations. It's hard to say off the top of my head. 10, maybe 12?
And out of those 10 or 12 incidents, how many of those were not terrorist plots instigated by the FBI?
Oh, none actually.
Not one.
Well, the underwear bomber, that wasn't us.
But it came to light that the underwear bomber was forced onto the plane by a well-dressed man, and he didn't go through security. That wasn't the FBI.
No. Might have been Secret Service. I think they handled that one.
I'd like to quote an article from the New York Times. Can I?
Sure, go ahead.
This is an article by David K. Shipler, published April 29, 2012, and I quote, "But all these dramas were facilitated by the FBI, whose undercover agents and informers posed as terrorists offering a dummy missile, fake C4 explosives, a disarmed suicide vest, and rudimentary training. Suspects naively played their parts until they were arrested. When an Oregon college student, Mohammed Osman Mohammed, thought of using a car bomb to attack a festive Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Portland, the FBI provided a van loaded with 55-gallon drums of inert material, harmless blasting caps, a detonator cord, and a gallon of diesel fuel to make the van smell flammable. An undercover FBI agent even did the driving, with Mr. Muhammad in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
To trigger the bomb, the student punched a number into a cell phone and got no boom, only a bust.
Terrible.
What do you say to that?
What's your point?
My point is it sounds like we really don't have a terrorism problem in America beyond those plots the FBI makes up itself.
What? How did you get in here? Agent Smith.
Be right in. What is it, sir? Hey, wait. How did you get in here? I don't believe this. He doesn't have clearance, sir. You'll have to come with me.
He doesn't have clearance? How did he get past you?
He snuck in here when I went to pay for the pizza delivery. I was there for a while. I wanted exact change.
Okay, hey, thanks for the interview. That's all I need now.
Sir, stop. Come back here.
He doesn't have clearance?
Thank you. Talk soon. You guys take care.
Security, we have a gate jumper headed for the elevators.
And whereas this interview did not yield all the answers I wanted, I did get to state my point. And as I was leaving the FBI building, I had the realization that making my point was worth the trip. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. We're back to breaking down the news. I'm Michael Wordsworth. To recap the top stories from today, France has a new president. Francois Hollande has defeated Nicolas Sarkozy in the French presidential runoff, making him the latest EU leader to be swept aside by the crippling debt crisis. Among the first steps the president-elect is planning is to push back against German-led austerity measures. Chancellor Angela Merkel has already invited Hollande to Berlin for talks, and clashes over Hollande's foreign policy are expected both in Europe and overseas, especially from key quarters in America, because of his views on phasing out the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Greece remains the focus of Europe's financial and political unease. Political parties that made gains by rejecting oppressive austerity measures still have to assemble a majority coalition in Parliament before they can begin governing. The Conservatives got the first try Monday but failed, leaving a new left-wing party to take its turn. If no party can assemble a coalition, the country will need to hold new elections probably in June. In Russia, Vladimir Putin reclaimed the Russian presidency under the vaulted gold ceiling of a Kremlin palace on Monday, as the police tried to stamp out a second day of protest in the city, passing on orders to detain anyone wearing a white ribbon, the opposition symbol. Mr. Putin took the oath of office for a third time, extending his status as Russia's paramount leader to a total of 18 years. He has said he may run for a fourth 6-year term after that, meaning he could legally remain in power until 2024. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This has been Breaking Down the News. We're going to be here Friday at 3:15, depending upon when we get things actually set up and running here, but 3:15 for sure. Till then, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank the callers for calling in. That was awesome, and I look forward to that feedback. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You take care. See you Friday. You've been listening to Breaking Down the News with Michael Wordsworth. Our continued mission to debunk the news. We're here to free the minds of the American population and the world by bringing you news that you wouldn't hear otherwise unless we read it to you or you actually went online and looked it up yourself, which isn't a bad idea. Maybe you should go do that. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Take care.